Hey everybody, Rob Hoke here, Bass Stalker Fishing. Today I want to do a video on punch rigs. Um, and the punch rig, it's really good in the summertime and also early fall when you have matted vegetation or vegetation where the canopy is so thick that your traditional plastic baits aren't going to penetrate through and you're not going to be able to get under that stuff and fish underneath it. Um, and the reason I like these spots, I did pretty good on them punching this year, and the reason I like it is because a lot of times bass, especially big bass, they like to be in the thickest, nastiest stuff they can find, mainly because they feel like they're better protected there. And what you're going to see is a lot of times you'll see fishermen just kind of pass these areas by because they are so hard to fish, and a lot of fishermen aren't equipped properly to fish those areas. So I'm going to show you the two different types of punch rigs you can set up, explain a little bit about the technique, go over the setup that I use, and hopefully it'll help you out. The first thing you need to go over is you need to have the right equipment. You need to have a rod, reel, and line that's capable of getting those fish out, especially if you're gonna, a lot of times you catch bigger fish in that matted vegetation, but it's thick, it's nasty stuff, and you need to get those bigger fish out. So what I like to throw it on is I have a 7.9 Abu Garcia Veritas 2.0 heavy action. This rod is very strong. I'm going to be able to, I'm very confident that I can set the hook on any fish and get that fish out of that. But you need a high-speed reel. This is my Abu Garcia Revo SX. Very good reel. 7:1 gear ratio. So I'm taking up a lot of line with every turn of the handle, and I'm throwing it on 65-pound P-line TCB X braid. Most of the time you're not going to need 65-pound braid, but if I'm fishing a thick mat that the canopy is 2 feet deep and I'm trying to pull a 5-pound bass out of that, you're going to need that 65-pound braid because you just want to rip him out of those weeds quickly and get him to the boat. So that's my setup. I wouldn't go anything as long as you're throwing a heavy rod. I mean, some people don't like the really long rods, but if you have a 7-foot heavy or a 7.3 heavy, you're going to be able to rip them out. But the reel and the line are very important. You want a high gear ratio reel, 7:1 or higher, and that 65-pound P-line TCB X braid is a must. All right, guys. Well, there's two different types of punch rigs I use. You can, I mean, plastic-wise, you can use any plastic you feel like punching with. The more streamlined it is, the better. It's going to go through that canopy a little easier. But there's two different variations that I like to use. This one is the more streamlined variation. It's just my weight, which your weight size is going to be determined on how thick the canopy is. And I like to use the smallest weight I can get away with, but still get through that canopy pretty easily. I don't want to have to make multiple flips, or I don't want to have to flip the bait way up in the air to get it to punch through that canopy. So whatever I can get away with to where it's the smallest weight, but it's still effectively getting through the canopy and getting to the bottom, that's the size weight I'm going to want to use. But I mean, it's very streamlined. This is a Zoom Z Crawl. You can tell it doesn't have a lot of appendages, and the appendages it does have on the bottom, they're pretty pliable, so they're going to get through that. They're going to fold in on themselves and get through that cover pretty easily. That's the first one, and that I'm going to use if it's really thick, nasty stuff. Your more normal setup is going to be one with a skirt, and basically you're just going to tie on. This is a VMC 5/0 heavy flipping hook. It's got a nice keeper here. It holds the bait really well in position. I use VMC hooks for everything I can. I love their hooks. You're going to tie that on. I tie it on with just a regular uni knot. I've done a video on them that you guys can go check out. And then, but first you're gonna put on your weight. This is just a 1 ounce tungsten flipping weight. And then I had just put on a black and blue skirt that you put on up there, and then you would tie on your hook. So you'd have something like this. Okay? Now, in order for you to effectively punch through all this stuff, you're going to need to peg this weight. And the way you do that is I use Vike rubber pegs, and this is the size large. And all you have to do is you run that peg through the bait, or through the weight, I'm sorry, and you pull that all the way through until you can't pull it anymore. You cut off your excess, making sure not to cut your line. And now that weight doesn't move. Okay? I mean, you can still slide it up and down with your finger. Like, you're going to have to slide this down once you put your plastic bait on. But you can see that thing doesn't move. And that's what you want when you're flipping. So then I'll take my Z-Crawl, and you just kind of Texas rig it. So I'm just going to do my normal Texas rig. And that keeper, you can see where that keeper is going to hold that plastic bait up. And then you put your hook through, making sure not to go all the way through the bait. You don't want that hook exposed on the other side. And then you'll have something like this. Now you can, at this time, you can slide your weight down, and then there's your punch rig. It just adds a little more flair, has a little more action to the bait. And this is what I'm going to use most of the time, unless it's so thick that I can't get something like this through. And a lot of times I'll be able to tell that my first couple spots, whether I can get away with using a skirt or not. If I can, I want to use the skirt because it does give the bait more action, but I don't necessarily have to have it. And if it's real thick, I'm going to go with the more streamlined version. And sometimes they'll just prefer this over the more action of the one with the skirt. But the way you want to fish these baits is kind of like a jig. You're going to punch it through the vegetation. You're going to let it sink to the bottom, and it's going to sink fast, which is good because you'll get reaction strikes sometimes. A lot of times they'll hit it right on the way down. But you'll let it get to the bottom. You'll just kind of stroke it 2-3 times up in the air, and then you'll pull it out and you'll punch the next spot. Sometimes what I like to do, and what I started doing after I noticed it this year, a lot of times those fish, you might be flipping or punching a thing of weeds that might be in 4 or 5 feet of water. So when you punch through the canopy, that thing's going to sink to the bottom, and then you don't get hit. Well, those bass might not necessarily be all the way on the bottom. A lot of times, and what I found out this year is, sometimes they like to be right on the underside of that canopy, right on the bottom of the canopy. They like to hold right up onto so that the weeds are on their back. And I think the reason they like to do that is because you have very oxygenated water there because of the vegetation, and also the vegetation puts off heat, so it's warmer water. They might, especially up here in the north, they might like that warmer water. And what I found out, I was flipping in, I was punching this mat and wasn't getting bit. And then what I did was I would just do it normal. I'd flip in, stroke it a couple times, and then what I decided to do is I brought it up to where I just felt the bottom of that canopy, and I just started bouncing it up and down a little bit, and I got bit. And I tried it, and I went to a couple more spots, and I got bit again. And it just so happened that day they were up right underneath the canopy. So make sure, if you're not getting hit on the bottom and you're flipping all these mats, which are high percentage areas, make sure you don't neglect right underneath that canopy. You can flip in, let it sink to the bottom, stroke it a couple times, lift it up to the top of the canopy, shake it a couple times, and then move on to your next spot. And you might be able to get a couple extra bites a day that way. But that's pretty much it. I hope it helps. If anyone has any questions, they can put it in the comments section. I'll do my best to answer them. And if you like the videos, please subscribe below. I really appreciate it. And we'll see you all next time.